I'm Christine Zips, investigative health journalist, and today we are continuing our series with the National Association for Children and Safe Technology. We have co-founders of this organization with us, and that's Diane Hickey and Rachel Newmer. So welcome, Rachel and Diane. Today our topic is we're talking about what else can you do? And what can a person actually do? Can you give any suggestions of what the public can do to help work around this issue of Wi-Fi in schools and getting schools wired?
Yes, we can talk a lot about that. If the Wi-Fi is in the schools, which is practically in all schools now across the United States, if you're able, pull your child out of this environment. It's a biohazard. There are all kinds of significant health conditions that result from this. And it just should not be going on. And if you're able to pull your child out of the school, okay. And if you're not, then what you can try and do is to do what you feel like you're moved to do. I mean, one avenue that I pursued very heavily was going to the school board meetings and giving public comments. And that happened like every 2 weeks where I was at. Another thing is that PTAs have a role in this too. And so you might want to get into the PTA and present at a meeting or put this information out there. And in fact, the Turn It Off for Kids initiative and all our media would be very useful, just to bring that idea and that knowledge into that arena. Also, the foundations, sometimes they have foundations that are set up, and some of them are specifically set up to raise money to buy more wireless devices and infrastructure, or whatever else that goes with that. And so all of these, I've outreached to PTAs and the foundations, and, you're going to find a mixed reaction, because if you put yourself in their shoes, the foundations, here they are gung-ho. They're usually putting together a gala or something to raise money. So there's an awful lot of effort, and it's all through, they think they're doing the right thing. So to find out that, wireless radiation isn't such a good thing. In fact, it's a very bad thing for the kids. They can be very, it's just like they don't want the information. So be prepared for that, but that's part of the psychology along with it, as well as the PTA. They get their backs up, and so anyway.
That's an important point, and I'm wondering, would you suggest that it might be a good idea if you sense that they're going to be reacting that way? It's almost like, oh, if I take that hot potato, I'm going to have to acknowledge that this is a problem, and then I'm going to maybe have to do something about it. But maybe if you could say, well, it's your choice, what you choose to do in this situation. But I feel like I must point out to you that if you choose to not do anything about it, that you are a very real risk of being held personally liable and accountable for the harm that's being done. If you're not even willing to look into seeing what you can do, and it's so easy to just return it. You just need to wire the school,
Right. And so with each of us, we have to figure out too is what are we comfortable? How are we going to deliver this information? When I first came across this, and then I knew it had to go somewhere. It couldn't just stay with me. It's just like, oh my gosh, how do I tell people? How do I convey this? Well, you may run into people who will say, oh, you're not saying it right, or you should say it this way, or you shouldn't say it that way. To me, it's be mindful of your audience, and what you're doing really is planting seeds, because you can't make another believe that this is the way it is, that this is the biohazard that it is.
Like,
And so all you have to do is give it out in the way you're going to give it out, mindful of, you want the best results when you do that, mindful of your audience.
We want people to understand that this is a very important issue, but we don't want people to think that there's nothing that they can do about it, because everybody, if they put their mind to it, can make a huge difference, even with taking small measures. And so one of the areas that you can make a difference, and of course, it does vary, from living space to living space, but there's many things that people can do to reduce the exposures in the home, which is very helpful. For example, in a child's bedroom, you don't want to have electronics around the bed, or nobody should have electronics around their bed. Televisions in bedrooms should be unplugged. Trying to place beds away from sources of radiation if possible, or turn them off. People can make that choice. We should not be suckered into believing that that is the only way to live. Like, oh my gosh, if you don't have a smartphone, if you don't have a wireless router, there's something wrong with you. That's not true. You don't have to belong to that mindset, and you'll be better off if you don't, I think. And not to say that people can't use those things, but with children, I think we need to definitely protective of their health and well-being. So I don't know if Diane can add to that, but.
Yeah, my experience was with a house, it took me probably a good year to get it all wired up once I figured things out. And I found that I still have teenagers in the house, as well as a spouse. And, when I started talking about this, there was a lot of pushback. I mean, it was just kind of foreign to me. It was just like, what's the big deal? Stop, turn that phone off. And
so and just wanting to ask you both that if we were to eliminate or set aside the wireless health harms associated with education technology, are there any other concerns you see with its use in our schools?
Yes, there definitely are. There's a laundry list of problems with screen time itself. And then on top of it, they are mandating the use of screens 24/7, anytime, anywhere. This is coming from the Department of Ed, and of course we've talked about it in our other interviews that we've done, that this is originating at the international level, that this is a mandate that all children are going to have a device, and that they're going to be able to access it anytime, anywhere. So we've got things like addictions, social, emotional, behavioral issues. We've got, issues with impulsivity, anxiety, depression, isolation, bullying and violence, suicide. We've got problems with sensory processing disorder, which a lot of people may not know what that is, but actually it's estimated that 1 in 20 children in the United States has some form of sensory processing disorder. I think they're saying that there is an epidemic of nearsightedness related to screen use, excessive screen use, which if you're telling people that kids have to have access to these devices anytime, anywhere, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I would call that excessive. And I think we're seeing that. I mean, the average teenager outside of school, I think, uses the smartphone for like at least 7 hours a day. Or, there's like screen use is off the charts, really.
Definitely. And when you, just like I've heard it described, that even when you set aside the science, the hundreds, if not thousands, of peer-reviewed, published scientific studies showing harm to bodies and brains and future generations. Even setting that aside, when you just simply look to see how microwave ovens cook our food, it's water molecules are being agitated inside the food. And when you look at we're mostly water, look at the parts of our body that are more water than others, like our eyeballs. Doesn't it make sense that the eyeballs would suffer? So, that's been well documented, as you said. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think the addiction piece of it is very easy for people to understand.
Absolutely.
There's, yeah, and of course we're still talking about just screen time, and kind of separating out the wireless exposure part of it.
Right.
Children, are more vulnerable, I think, to addiction than adults are even. And there, the video games, the social media, if Dr. Dunkley talks about this, these things are highly addictive and they're designed to be addictive. Now, in the research that I've done about education technology in our schools, they call it, the DOE, that's our U.S. Department of Education calls it the gamification of education.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, kids, they just don't have that ability anymore they're bored, it's irrelevant, books are irrelevant, they don't need them anymore. They're digital natives, we have to give them these things to learn. That's the only way these kids are going to learn. And they say that we're entering the era of the total game. So everything is going to be seamless, where it's kind of hard to tell the difference between the real world and the augmented screen world. And so that is a real term used in education technology. It's called the gamification of education. Now, when we gamify things, video games are addictive. And that's what they're talking about. They're talking about education through video games and saying that our children aren't capable of doing anything else but that. So they are, in fact, addicting our children to these devices.
Exactly. I understand that they're designers, app designers, that they're looking to make these games much more seductive to the children. And teachers will say that that's like one of their main challenges with teaching, is that they're so distracted by all of these games. And I think they're even talking about a particular game called Fortnite that's out there, and it's like really hot and everybody's playing it. And then there's Pokemon in just like this hive mentality. And then we've got artificial intelligence coming in, and, it's just all tied in together. It's a big, it's part of the plan. So.
Right. And then you add on top of that, you add the radiation. You add these environments where the kids are just awash in microwaves. And though, believe it or not, people become addicted to these frequencies. So on one hand, you have the addiction to the social media or the violent video games or the not violent video games. You just have that addiction going on. But then also children or adults, they become very uncomfortable when they are not in those frequencies because their body acclimates to it.
Right. I think they even get a little dopamine hit from every time they get a like on Facebook, for example. That's literally a chemical thing happens there, it gets them a little high, and that creates the addiction, things like that.
And there's so much out there. There's all these stories in the mainstream news programming that talk about how the kids are addicted to this stuff. So
right. So what they've done is they've constructed a curriculum that ensures and mandates addiction in the kids, ensures it.
mm-hmm.
And the talk is 24/7, because that's what, I can remember reading an article in the paper, local paper, this is in Orange County, California, and the trustee here in town saying she wants these kids to have these devices 24/7. So, I mean, this is.
Yep, in the classes, even in the school buses.
And it's funny too, because the language that they use, they try to make it sound like it's so okay. Like,
course, normalization.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they'll say, like, I've heard like the superintendent say, immediacy. We're just living in the era of immediacy. And you know what immediacy is? It's impulsivity, is what it is. It's like nobody can wait a second. It's got to happen like right now, or else there's no ability to wait.
No downtime. Children are not afforded an opportunity to have a random thought, have a problem they're dealing with, maybe have some time to think about it, to think about the solutions. They've got to fill every second with media, and it's just out of control.
I have read research performed by renowned scientists all over the world showing the possible side effects of radiation emitted from wireless technology. Let me just rattle some off right now. Brain cancer, tumors, blood-brain barrier deterioration, and even infertility. With the risks this high, it's impossible to understand how MCPS can continue to expand wireless technology in classrooms. Of course, Wi-Fi is inevitable in the real world, but placing Wi-Fi transmitters, which I should mention, these transmitters are extremely high density and can power radiation waves through walls, even more so through our own bodies, in almost every single classroom in a school so that it turns into a giant microwave, is a violation of student and teachers' rights, and simply unnecessary. MCPS could just as easily wire all the technology. I personally, as a student, feel extremely uncomfortable going to school every day, a supposed safe haven, seeing my friends sitting directly under body-blazing transmitters, and being denied the right to wire my own Chromebook. My mom and I asked the school for permission to wire the device. The school initially deemed it impossible. And we wrote back saying that if you have the right supplies, it is in fact not impossible at all. The school then backtracked, making a fickle excuse of many on how the wired cord would be a tripping hazard. We're still waiting for an answer. The only reason why MCPS would be denying an act as simple as this is because they don't want all the Chromebooks in the school to be wired as well. What is MCPS trying to hide, and why does that go first before their own students' health? Enough backtracking. We want answers. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, do we have some positive spin on this? That's truthful, of course, nothing but. That's what we're imparting here to kind of wrap up this series with. Are we any final comments you'd like to share?
Well, we hope we've given you enough information, more information than you had before on wireless, especially wireless in schools and what's going on. We hope you can take this information, take our Turn It Off for Kids initiative, and just use it as you will. Just try and the message, do what you can in your own environment, to get rid of the wireless, because, now you know. And with all this, and I think you said this on one, take what resonates and leave the rest.
Definitely.
And anyway, and I know Rachel's happy to share this information. We're glad to have this opportunity, Chris, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you. My pleasure. You both have done the heavy lifting, and it's been my pleasure to host this series with you. And a small thing to pay you back as an investigative journalist. You're very much close to at the top of my list of valuable resources. So thank you for all that you've given me and everyone else. Hopefully, with everyone looking at the series, that you're learning a lot and can jump in and join to turn things around in your community for our children. So as if their lives depended on it, because it actually does. So this is affecting every living being on the planet, but our children are more vulnerable. So I'm sure they thank you for it as well. So with that, thank you so much. and for hanging in there with us. It's been a lot of information. We're doing our best to get it edited to the nuggets for you to assimilate. And thank you again very much, and we will see you again soon. Bye for now.